first Susie Boggess album, which was called Somewhere Between, which was, of course, the great...
Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth.
Excuse me, I produced the first Susie Boggess album called Somewhere Between, which is the great Merle Haggard song. And on that record we had Night Rider's Lament, we had her, of course, her spectacular version of Cowboy Sweetheart, Somewhere Between itself, and a number of other things. I produced several of the Forrester Sisters albums. I produced the last Newgrass Revival album in captivity before Bela went off to be a jazz musician. That album was Friday Night in America, and we did the original version of Callin' Baton Rouge. And I was back in LA, and we cut that record, and this is a true story. Bela Fleck had said, I was hired by Capitol to produce Newgrass, and Bela had said, if we have a country hit, I'm quitting Newgrass Revival. And they'd been together 25 years. And I, you know, naive, I went, why on earth would you do that? And he said, because I'm going to be a jazz banjo star. And I said, you know, like everybody, and this is a good lesson. Oh, come on, man. You know, what's the old joke that was running around town in those days? The least often heard phrase is that the banjo player's Porsche out in the lot. You know, I said, come on. Sure enough, we had a hit going up the charts with Newgrass Revival. And Bela Fleck quit the band and went off and became a jazz banjo star. And then, about a year later, I heard one of our great tracks. I mean, note for note. I heard Callin' Baton Rouge on the air. And I got a call from Sam Bush in LA, and he said, I bet you're wondering what you're hearing, Waldman. And I said, I sure am. That's our record. And I hear Cowan's voice, but he's not singing. It sounds like he's singing the third, but it's everything we did, except maybe there's a stick on the snare instead of a brush. And he says, that's a Garth Brooks record. And I said, what the hell happened? And he said, Garth is a huge fan of all of ours, and he called the boys in. He put on our version of Callin' Baton Rouge. This is God's honest truth. And he said, I want you boys, and I want everybody in here who made that record, and I want you boys to play note for note what you played on Callin' Baton Rouge. So he said, the only difference is I want Eddie Bayers to play a hard snare instead of a soft snare. And of course, they cut it exactly. They just took our record. And of course, my comment was, well, they didn't quite have everybody who made that record. There was somebody missing that day, you know. But it was very flattering. Garth went on to cut a number of things off of those productions, and he also cut Night Rider's Lament off the Susie Boggess record. He, you know, so I was extremely flattered. So did that, and you know, I mean, if it's an esoteric, weird acoustic country band, I got involved. So I produced a record on the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, which was a true honor. It was really great.
I didn't know that any of those guys were still alive.
They are, and they actually, that version of Fishin' in the Dark that was such a big hit for the Dirt Band was actually something originally that the Daredevils, they went into my catalog and found it, and that was their arrangement. Slower and funkier. It was a great trip to work with those guys. You know.
I've got their vinyl.
Yeah, yeah, man.
Okay, let's have one more tune, folks. We got the Refugees here with us, and they're going to be driving off into the cold North Texas afternoon over to Uncle Calvin's for their gig, and then you can drive through the snow to Oklahoma.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm used to the snow being from Maine.
So. Maine, down east, and I was used to it. So we're going to do On My Way? That was the plan. Okay. You going to be back there?
Yeah, well, I don't know where I'm
You should be here. You need to be, oh, hell. All right. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4.
I
you very much.
Wendy, Cindy, and Deborah.
Got us.
Yes.
You got us.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Mark.
Yes, sometimes.